family first, because when you homeschool, your family is very important, right? So the first thing, my family is here with me today. Danny is my fiance, and we run Learning with Fun together. So we work side by side every day, doing lots of different things, but also running our house. We have 4 beautiful children. 3 of them are with us today, and then our oldest just signed up for the Air Force, so she's flying and getting ready for that next week, so she can't be here today. Also in the audience is my mom. And my mom retired yesterday, and it was very exciting that she can be around more. And it's also her birthday today, but it's really nice for her to be here because she's one of my biggest fans. So thanks for being here, Mom. So you guys are here to talk about executive functioning. And so a lot of what I do is working with kids with executive functioning. So today, we're really going to talk about what Learning with Fun is. And so at Learning with Fun, we develop personalized education. We do homeschooling as well as academic coaching, which it's not classic tutoring. People do come in for tutoring support, but we develop curriculum based on kids' learning styles to help them learn skills. And we also provide remote learning, which is really nice. A little bit about myself. I went to school for social work and thought I would take that career path for a little while. I went to graduate with a bachelor's in social work and then started graduate work as a social worker and really knew that I wanted to teach. I loved the idea of working with kids, and so I went back to school to get my master's in education. And during my graduate program, I was fascinated with the neuroscience behind education and how people learned. And so one of the projects that I did was I built individualized education programs for kids with autism. And I learned the science behind autism and how to teach kids that had different levels of autism so they could hopefully become functional adults in some way. So today's talk is, we're going to have 5 different steps. The first step is I'm going to define to you what executive functioning is. So there's lots of different definitions out there. We all think we know what it is, but we're going to have a basis of a term of what it is. And then I'm going to talk to you about the core 7 functions of executive functioning. And this kind of talks a bit about our spatial awareness, how we regulate our emotions, how we organize our thoughts, those types of things. And then I'm going to talk to you a lot about our Baines approach, and I will get into that more through the talk, but at Learning with Fun, we use an approach that we developed called Baines. And it's really about full body learning and looking at every piece of our body and how it relates to how we function in daily life. And then I developed a 3-drill model to help kids with executive functioning. And I'm going to talk to you about that method that I use with kids. And it has been proven to be pretty effective. And then the last part of this is I'm going to talk to you about tips. If you have not gotten the handout, you can get it at the end. It's in the back, but it's for you to take home some tips that you can do at home that can help. So we're going to get started. But first we're going to have a little fun. All right, let me know at the end, I'm going to ask you a question, if you have a child that fits this type of criteria, right? Keeps a messy room, fails to complete assignments unless you're hovering over them, loses things on a regular basis. That could be jackets, clothes, shoes, or you find paper shoved in a bag somewhere, right? Or, socks, things like that. Gets stuck on small steps projects, right? We're all doing homeschool learning. Do you have to really break it down for them? Trouble keeping track of time and managing time. It gets overwhelmed when they're asked to do a specific assignment that might not be of an interest to them. Cannot be flexible with habits. This is like transitions, routines, right? Like if it comes out of ordinary, gets upset with very small details, right? Like if their expectation is that they're going to go and see their friend and you need to stop and get something at a store, right? Like, and they weren't prepared for that. Are they able to get through that? Fails to control impulses or lashes out with frustration. So, in the audience, how many of you have a child that is like this? Okay, now, take a look around. That's why you guys are here, right? Okay. So, we're going to talk about what is executive functioning. So, pretend that your brain is a busy highway. Okay, things are going all over the place. Your executive functioning skills are like the traffic rules. It tells you what you're supposed to do, how you're going to control yourself, and really takes in all that stream of information that's coming through. So, on a daily adventure in your world, you have information flooding at you all the time. So think of a child, right? Whether you are someone that doesn't do electronics, you have electronic devices, you have people talking at you, you have things around you, right, all the time, your environment. Information is always flooding your brain. So someone that has executive functioning, that's a lot. Their brain can't process all the different types of formulas of information coming at them. So when we look at that, we have to really kind of break it down and think about, all right, what type of information does your child respond to best? Is it verbal? Is it visual? So this is where we start to talk about the 7 core functions of like what is executive functioning. So self-awareness. Are they aware of what's around them? Are they clumsy? Do they walk into stuff? I use a classic example. You have a son or daughter who gets into the refrigerator, right? And they pour themselves a glass of milk and they leave the container on the counter, right? And how many times have you told them, could you put it back, right? Like the fridge is right there. You could put it back. You took it out, right? But in their mind, they're already thinking about something else, right? Their brain isn't there. So that's that self-awareness. Do they have that ability? And for parents, it's very hard because you get very frustrated quickly because you've probably told your son or daughter that about 100 times. So then you have inhibition. So that's, do they have self-restraint, self-control? Now, we tend to get upset when our kids aren't able to control themselves. But when you look at somebody that has executive functioning, what their body is really doing is they're trying to express to you what they're feeling, but they don't have the ability to formulate the words, so they become very frustrated very quickly. Non-verbal working memory. So a lot of times, visual cues, people will say, okay, well, use visuals to help them remember. Well, for some kids with executive function, that works great, but there's a big portion of them that visual cues they don't remember. So when we look at it, how do they remember information? Can they do it visually? Can they process that short-term memory visual cues, making a list, those types of things? And then we have verbal working memory, and this is speech. So we see this a lot in high school students, middle school kids, right? Because the content that you're teaching your kids now is more in depth. It's less worksheets. It's, there's a lot of things that they have to remember. And that is tricky for them, and that's where you see a lot of high school kids and middle school kids start to slide in their ability to produce quality work. Because there's a lot of verbal cues, a lot of verbal information, whether you're showing that to them through videos, you're reading it to them, what have you. The other part of this is emotional regulation. Now, even if you don't have executive functioning stuff, sometimes it's hard to regulate your emotions, right? You might get frustrated, right? Or it's just a really bad day. A lot of kids that struggle with executive functioning, they have a hard time controlling their emotions, and a lot of times you'll see it through anxiety. And the anxiety piece is it's almost crippling for them. And as a parent, you don't always see it, but that is usually where it comes out. And because of that, you will see in boys more aggression, a lot of physicalness. With girls, they tend to be more emotional, isolating. And so it's really important to kind of look at that when you have a child that has executive functioning. Are they able to really have those tools to be able to work through that self-regulation? Self-motivation. So this is a big one because you have to be motivated in life to get to the next step, right? And we're all here because we're educating our kids and we want them to be motivated and to do amazing things in the world and to be great adults. So this is hard when you have a child that just can't wrap their head around it and get out of their own way and be motivated, right? They probably are motivated, but they can't process all the things that are going on in their mind, and so it makes them not motivated at all, because if I do something, I can't complete it, I can't get through it, so why do I want to do it at all? Right? So they have that piece of failure inside, a lot of kids that struggle with this, because they want to be motivated, but they physically can't because they can't process enough. So when I assess somebody, I look at that motivation. Do they have the motivation inside and they just don't have the tools to execute what they need to get done? And then the last 7th step is planning and solving problems. We have to do this all the time. And when your kids are first born, right, I have 4, and all of you have lots of children, I assume, you start at a very early age saying, okay, can you tell me that with your words? Can you make eye contact? How might we solve this, right? You start that language very young, and then they get to middle school, and somehow we expect them to know how to solve all those. You've done all that hard work, right? As a mom and dad, you've done that hard work when they were little, and you're hoping that they have the skills to problem solve. Kids that have executive functioning, they have it, they know what they need to do, they just can't access it. So one of the things I really stress to you is that you still do those verbal talks, like, okay, you have this big project and you have a game you have to do and you also have work. Okay, how might we solve this? Let's walk through it, let's prioritize. Or it could be something that's a social issue, right? Like, okay, I have this friend and we have this issue going on and I don't know how to process it. Okay, well, let's do that visual story walk. Let's talk about it. So even as an adult, it's always good to process with somebody else, right? Like you call your friend or your husband or whoever and say, I gotta talk about this. You're doing that problem solving. It doesn't go away even when they get older. So kids with executive function, they struggle with that a lot. So you gotta have to, as a parent, still do those talks, if I can't stress enough. Does anyone have any questions so far? Yeah.
One, are these kids that are just born randomly, or is this a genetic component, or is it?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. So there is a genetic component, but in our world that we live in, this is I don't want to say it's an epidemic, but you see it more often than not now. And that's because we are not made to use our executive functioning skills as often as we used to have to. Like, you used to have to remember, I'm not that old, but I remember that if I wanted to call my friend, I had to look her number up in a phone book. Kids don't have to do that anymore. They don't have to learn how to organize things or always look up words in a dictionary. Like, everything is by the touch of our hand. And we all have phones, right? There's a huge technology piece of this that we've made things much easier for ourselves, but it has hindered the ability to use your executive functioning skills. Now, to also answer your question, unfortunately, executive functioning is not considered a disability. where you see it is with kids with like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, those processing disorders that you see. So, does that answer your question? Okay. Is there any other questions? I'll stop periodically to ask. No? Okay. So, why do these 7 steps matter? By the age of 2, self-awareness is already being developed. By the age of 30, you haven't really physically developed your brain enough until then to make planning and problem-solving skills. So, we all have kids and teenagers, right? And we're saying, okay, what are you going to do with your life? Where are you going to go to college? What job are you going to do? What do you want to do with yourself? So from the age of 17 to 25, these kiddos have to make some pretty big decisions with their life. And their brain isn't quite fully developed until the age of 30. So think about it for just a second. If you have a child with executive functioning and they don't have any support and they haven't learned how to do some of these tools that they need to function, right? How are they going to make these big life decisions? And I probably think there's a few of you out there right now that are here for a reason, because you might have a teenager and you're like, oh my God, they're going off to college and I can't be there to remind them to pack their backpack or to remember their cell phone charger, or you're going to need money to get on that bus or something along those lines, right? Like you can't go to college with your son or daughter, right? You can't help them hold down a job in order to pay their bills. That's not your job anymore. And so at the age of 30, these skills are really not fully developed until then, but you can help them with tools in order to make sure that they can do what they need to do as an adult. So that's why these steps are very important. Am I moving too fast for you guys? Okay. So, I'm a science guru. I love science, and I could spend hours talking to you about the neuroscience behind executive functioning. But I really don't want anybody to fall asleep in here. I would rather you not leave, so I'm only going to spend a little bit of time on this. If, for any reason, you are interested in any of the science behind this, please come see me, email me, call me. I'd be more than happy to tell you about it, okay? So, frontal lobe is the #1 area where you regulate your emotions, you do your processing skills. You also have your short-term and long-term memory in this place. Abstract thinking. So it's also where you have the attention, motivation, managing your body movements. How many of you have kiddos where you're teaching them and they have that loosey-goosey body and you're like, okay, you look like a wet noodle now. You probably are not listening to me, right? I have a lot of those in my classrooms. So this is where it all starts. And teenagers specifically, can you guys hear me okay back there? Specifically have all those hormones that flood through their body, and their abstract thinking is already hindered. So add on executive functioning. It's pretty hard for them to function. They do some very impulsive decision making. And you'll sit there after and be like, so you knew that this was wrong, but you did it anyways? Yeah. Well, why? I have no idea. And you're like, okay, well, can we talk about this? Yep. And they literally cannot tell you why they did it. And as a parent, you're sitting there and like, are you kidding me right now, right? Like, we've talked about this a million times, but you did it anyways. Yep, I did. And it's because in the moment, they have no impulse control. They literally don't. They're functioning as like a 2-year-old at that moment in a 17 or younger body, right? Like it happens starting as the age of 10. All right. So when you're looking at some of this, you really want to think about, how do I help them make good judgments, right? You can talk for hours about good judgments, but keep in mind, you still have that impulse problem. Meeting goals, completing tasks, and working memory. This is a very big piece of what executive functioning is. And so there's a lot of science behind it of how the neurons connect to each other. And it's pretty fascinating. A long time ago, there was a study out there that for people that struggled with this or had autism or processing delays, they would actually remove your frontal lobe because that way the behavior stopped. Over time, science decided that that was pretty inhumane, good thing, right? So when you remove your frontal lobe, all of your behaviors, your emotions, your regulation, you're pretty much just a walking zombie. So think about how that very big front piece right here controls a very big part of your day. So I won't bore you on any more of the science. We've talked about, I think during the question and answer, I told you that executive functioning disorder is often present in students with disabilities such as ADHD, dyslexia, and autism because it affects that part of the brain. So there is a good side to some of this stuff, okay? If you're here because your son or daughter has executive functioning, they think outside the box. You have more entrepreneurs that are have executive functioning than any other group of entrepreneurs. So they're most often going to do amazing things in this world if they're given the right support. They're very creative. They tend to be athletic. And so children and adults that have executive functioning can look at the world in many different levels than somebody that can't. And I happen to think that's amazing. I have family that has executive functioning, and they can sit there and create the most amazing piece of art or come up with some great business ideas. So it's actually a great thing. So some famous people: Justin Timberlake, Will Smith, Michael Phelps, Jim Carrey, Sir Richard Branson, and Albert Einstein. They all had executive functioning, and they all have to work at it. Okay, so we're on step 4. We're going to talk about our Baines method. And this is something that when a student comes into our office, we look at this approach and how we build their individualized curriculum as well as their program. If they're coming for executive functioning support, or if they're coming for homeschooling or academic coaching. That's what we do. So, at Learning with Fun, we build individual curriculum, like I said. We pull all the pieces together for personalized learning. So, we're going to start off with the letter B, and B is behavior. So, when I look at behavior, it's not just how your child acts at home, but how does his behavior affect their daily life? What do they do? Are they impulsive and they can't sit still long enough to take in information? A whole spew of different ways. How does your child interact with others? Do you try to go to those co-ops and it just doesn't work because he or she has a hard time interacting with other friends? Building those relationships. Do they have anxiety to the point where they can't really learn in a different environment? So behavior changes are long-lasting, and that's the thing with executive functioning. You have to teach them behavioral changes, not just skills, because if you just teach skills, those behaviors never change, and behavior is what makes a difference. You really have to make those behavioral changes so they're lifelong and they're lasting, and that the behavior automatically comes natural to them after you spend some good time working at that. So we do look at behavior. That's what B stands for. Aspirations is A. What are the students' goals and dreams? I love it when a student comes in. I had one recently. She struggles in school in multiple areas, but she was always told that she wasn't going to do anything in life because she just couldn't get through school. But she always wanted to work with animals. And she wanted to open up her own business, but she had the idea that she just couldn't do it because she didn't have the skill set or the executive functioning to be able to work through it all. On my way up here, we got an email And she is working at an animal shelter, walking dogs and doing what she loves. She has worked so hard on learning behaviors that it filtered into her aspirations, what she loves to do, right? It makes her happy. And so for a lot of kids, when they come in, I want to know, what are your dreams? What do you want to do? Put aside the motivation and all the other stuff. What do you love? And if you can figure out what your kids love and help them work towards that, you find that motivation. You help them find those skills. The I is interest. So aspirations and interests are different. Your interests is what I build their curriculum on and what I help them with their executive functioning. So if you like to play sports, okay, well, I like sports. I might not know a lot about football, but I do know a lot about baseball. Let's talk about sports, you know. I learn more from my students' interest about things. I never knew that you could be a professional YouTuber until I worked with a bunch of third graders. I was like, that's really a profession? I have no idea about that. Tell me more, right? I have kids that are so interested in gaming, right? And no matter what your idea is on it, I don't own a device of that sort in my house, but they've learned about history of weapons. They've learned about, I didn't know bagged milk existed, but that was a thing in a game. And so one of my students wrote a whole blog on that. So finding what your kids' interests are and building curriculum at home for them around that can really spark their want to sit and learn a little bit longer. The N is nutrition. So nutrition is hard. We live in a world that we're always busy, and so some kids like to eat in the morning, some kids don't. I have one that does not like breakfast, and when she was in public school, I would be like, okay, come on, we gotta catch the bus, you gotta eat something. And she usually couldn't put something in her belly, and so by 9 o'clock she was starving, right? 9 or 10 o'clock, she's hungry. Well, snack time in a public school is 5 minutes maybe, right? And so all day, until lunchtime, her belly's hungry. And so that attention, when your belly's hungry, or hangry as we call it in my house, your attention span is very limited, right? So also what you're taking into your body. Your gut is your second brain, almost, if you want to think about it, even though this is your brain. Your gut is always processing food and sending the nutrients to places that it needs to be. The more carbs you eat, the harder your body is working to process. And so we really look at what is your son or daughter taking in for nutrients. Nutrients are huge. It helps with concentration. How much water are kids drinking? Water lubricates the brain. The more water kids drink that have executive functioning, the easier it is for them to concentrate. So I always have kids in my office while they're having executive functioning treatment with me, bottled water. Like, you have to drink the water while doing it and after. So really check to see how much your kids are taking in. One of my favorites, exercise. So when you're homeschooling, how much time does your child sit inside and work? Exercise is very important, and now I don't mean that they get up and walk around the room for a little bit. Like, they need to have some heavy breathing, get their bodies moving. Exercise increases endorphins, and it also helps produce a chemical in their body that helps with concentration. So I really strongly urge all of you to get outside now that it's spring, and maybe develop a walking program or something with your son or daughter. We ski. Our family are skiers, and so we ski in the wintertime. But each one of our kids has a different sport that they like to do. But if your son or daughter are not really into that, because not everyone is, do some family things. Go for a hike, go outside, but make sure that they get enough exercise every day. It's important. Sleep. So kids with executive functioning, their brains never shut off. Never. And so you might think that your child is going to bed and getting 10.5 hours sleep. No. They might physically be in that bed, but they're definitely not sleeping that long. Their brains have a very hard time shutting off. And so our brains regenerate and take in and remember all the information we took in all day. And so if your son and daughter are not getting that deep sleep, they have a harder time concentrating the next day. The information that you might have just taught them and they've learned, most likely pieces of it are lost. You're going to have to go over that again. They're tired constantly. You'll see them, they're sluggish, this is over yet, right? That ability to stay on task is just crippling for them because their bodies aren't tired. I mean, their bodies are tired and we don't see it and we don't understand it. So just for a second, think about it. You've been up working for, 12 hours and it's been a really long day and your body is toast. That's how your son or daughter probably feels almost every day, and we want them to be on task. We want them to stay organized. We want them to remember information. We want them to be good human beings and us not have to nag at them, and their bodies are exhausted. And so it's kind of this really vicious cycle. There are some really good tips for sleep. I always go the natural route, but no electronics an hour before bed. Drink some warm tea or something warm in their body, a hot shower, calming music. There are some really good apps out there that talk about that help them get into the different realms of sleep. So there are a lot of other things that you can do. Some people use melatonin. I think that's everybody has their own view on those types of things. But the natural way of getting your son and daughter to get a very good night's sleep and to settle their brain, rhythmic massage sometimes helps too. Do you have any questions so far? No? Yeah.
You mentioned so there's the brain functioning and trying to have that nutrition and all that. So if you're taking supplements like fish oils, omegas, things like that, or specific for brain health, is that going to help with the executive function?
Yes. One of the best things you could do is omega-3s. Fish oils are amazing. So I see a lot of kids that have ADHD, and doctors usually love to push the medication. There's tons of studies out there. Do your research. Omega-3 fatty acids have a higher success rate than any ADHD med. Taking it at a very early age at a higher dose, it's amazing what it does. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. I think I saw another hand out there. No? We're good? Okay. So just as a recap, our Baines method is behavior, aspirations, interests, nutrition, sleep, exercise, and sleep. I always flip those every time. So now we're going to get into what I do if somebody comes in with executive function into the office. I developed a 3-tier model, and the first drill usually lasts somewhere between a month or two, depending on how strong the student is. So what I do is I put up 5 words on the whiteboard, and right here you see turtle, frog, tree, fish, and flower. So sometimes I will have different words with all different beginning letters. And then, as you can see, turtle, tree are similar, frog, fish, and flower, right? So what happens is they see these, and then I put the whiteboard eraser in front of them. I said, okay, you have the power. Erase this when you think you can remember it. And what they have to do is remember it, and then write it in order as they saw it on the board, okay? Now, the goal is for them to be able to hold that information up to 20 minutes. In between, I am playing like memory games with them. We might go for a walk and I'm talking to them. So first session, usually this happens. I put it up on the board. I'm like, okay, so what are you doing after school today? Or what are you going to do for the rest of your day? Nothing. I hear not a peep from them, and they're like so concentrated because they don't want to lose the information, right? So I had one kid, we would walk up and get donuts because he really liked donuts, and he came to me first thing in the morning before school. It was 7 o'clock, and I was like, you know what, buddy, you totally, the fact that you can get here on time and do this before school, let's go get a donut. First week he wouldn't say one word to me until we got back, and he'd be like, oh, okay, I got this now. And he put it on the board and he's like, I'm gonna answer all your questions now. So he could remember everything I said to him, but he was so fixated on this. Why this matters is because this is that visual. Remember I was telling you at the beginning about the different forms of input that they have to think about. So these are the visual inputs. If you write stuff on a board and they're in college or in school with you guys and they need to remember visual information, this is what happens. And so normally it takes about 2 months on a severe case for them to complete the first tier of this. We start out by somewhere between 5 to 7 minutes, and then we work into the span. It's very fascinating to see, and when they do reach this, at the end of this level, they're super excited. It's very fun for them. Now, when kids leave at the very beginning of this, they are very tired. A lot of parents will tell me that they've had emotional meltdowns. And when they're doing this drill work, they don't feel like they've done anything until after they leave. Because what it's doing is it's rebuilding the neurons, which I'll show you a picture of after. Second tier of this is I put a sentence on the board. So it's more than just one, it's usually 1 or 2 sentences. And so now they have to remember more. So this could be like, today's the first day of spring, I hope we don't have any more snow, right? And so then they'll do the same thing and they erase it. This tier usually is the easiest for them because they've just worked so hard at remembering. They've learned some type of tools, but the muscle is already strong. I kind of relate these as, decide you want to run your first 5K, right? You start really slow and you're working those muscles, and then by the first 5K you've done, you're now running that 3 mile and you're feeling okay. And this is where they're at. They're feeling okay. They're ready to do this level. This is the fastest one. They usually master this within a month. Then we get to the third, and this is I take away all visuals and I tell them words like the first one, the 5 in the row, verbally. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, we gotta remember it verbally. Because what happens is that this is that other part, that verbal information, that verbal input. I know in my house, I'll be like, okay, I need you to go upstairs and brush your teeth and make sure you make your bed and bring me down your dirty laundry. You walk up the stairs and they see that shiny ball on the floor and they're like, oh yeah, I gotta brush my teeth. Oh, that's what you excited to do, right? And so this part of the drill work works that piece. And so I'll say to them, okay, tree, frog, flower, what have you. And I'll say it to them 3 times, and I look at them like, now, during this time, I make sure that we have eye contact, okay? And so they're seeing the words come out of my mouth, but they also, I know that it's registering. 3 times, and then I say, okay, you got it? Yeah. And so we do the whole thing, we play games, I distract them, right? Because in life, there's distractions all the time. In your home, when you're teaching, the phone might be going off, you might have dogs, you might have people coming in and out. You might be doing your own work, right? There's distractions, same as in a classroom. So then they have to write the words in order as what I said to them. Now, verbally they can tell me it, but when they get to the board and they have to write it down, there's a disconnect. And this is a very hard skill for them to master. And it is a connection from the brain all the way to your fingers. It's a physical connection. So physically, when they're erasing the words, they're making that connection. Because they're seeing them and they're physically touching them. That's 2 ways that their senses are in. When I'm just saying them to you, there's no physical connection. Their brain hasn't made that connection. So when they get to the board, they're like, oh wow, now I had it. Can I just say it to you? I'm like, no, you can't just say it to me. It's pretty fascinating to watch. I will tell you that I've had a very cool case that he went through this whole program as the guy I was telling you about with the donuts. He's mastered it. He has graduated from executive functioning treatment. He's been with us for a year now, and it's amazing to watch him be able to be functional in school. This was a kid that was spending 3 to 4 hours a night on homework when it was only an hour worth, right? And becoming very frustrated in school. So it's been great to watch. So now, get to show you the science behind it. Like I told you, I love science. This is your brain. You have the right side, left side. One is more mathematic, one is creative. Have you guys ever heard the term crossing that midline? You gotta get your both sides to connect. And when you have executive functioning, your both sides don't connect. And so the drill work that I do makes that happen. It's pretty fun to watch. I love it, as you can tell. But it's strengthening both sides. All right. I'm going to tell you a couple stories of students of mine, and then this is more for that gifted student. Yeah?
Before you go on, I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
What if you'd like to practice these skills, but you have a child who's not reading yet? Could you use something other than words?
Absolutely.
Like maybe letters or shapes? Or
Letters are great. Briefly, how old?
He is almost 7.
Okay.
So he knows his letters. And some words, but not.
You could use numbers.
Okay.
Letters or numbers. Yeah, they don't have to be words. Also pictures, when you do that, at least pictures are kind of hard because you have to draw them out, but I would do letters or numbers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Gifted children. You see this a lot with gifted kids. And so I'm going to give you a couple scenarios of gifted children, and then kind of talk about this with you. So I have a student, Billy. He's 3 years old. At 3, he could identify every Thomas the Tank Engine character that appeared on the show. By 4, he figured out how to read on his own. By 5, his obsession with presidents meant that he could tell you every name, birth date, and interesting fact about everyone. I'm not sure about any one of you in here, but I don't think I could do that, just for the record. Not sure if anyone else could do that. At 7, Billy memorized the chemicals of the periodic table for fun. Okay? When Billy was 11, his parents were surprised to find that he couldn't keep up with school. His papers were a mess, illegible, and were dog-eared or either shoved at the bottom of the backpack. While he completed his homework in record time, he often forgot to turn it in. Billy usually aced quizzes and tests, but when he didn't, he would get a D. His parents struggled to understand why their bright child was unable to do school. My second scenario is Kelsey. At the age of 4, she could read on her own. She could recite any fact of a Greek or Egyptian mythology by the age of 7. By the 4th grade, she started to hate school. She was tested, and her test came back showing that she was 2 grades ahead of herself. Her parents went into the school and said, could we challenge her or get her into gifted and talented? And they said no, because she doesn't reach the top 3% because of her executive functioning skills. She was labeled as often as disheveled, irresponsible for not passing in homework. This is a typical story that I hear often for gifted kids, right? Now, we look at it as, how come they just can't, organize themselves and pass in their homework and do all these things? It's because it's too easy. And too easy has a whole problem in itself. If things are too easy, they're not able to have to use the executive functioning. Hold on 1 second. Students are not challenged. They miss out on opportunities to practice critical executive functioning skills. They are more likely to become risk away from risk, not able to tackle challenges that are out of their comfort zone. So imagine that student about Kelsey is my daughter. So imagine being a parent and knowing that your kid can do so much, right? That they're smart, and you show them an opportunity, but because they have to come out of their comfort zone, it's too overwhelming for them. Because in school, everything has come easy. When things come easy, they don't know what that feels like when they have to work at something. So they kind of go away from taking those challenges. So too easy is not a very healthy teaching strategy. At home, when you are building curriculum for your son or daughter, the beauty of homeschooling, which I love, is that you, just because they might be in 3rd or 4th grade or in middle school, you can make that curriculum as hard as you want or as easy as needed. It's very individualized. That's the beauty of homeschooling. That's why it's become such a big thing in Maine. And it's one of the things that I love to do. You can allow the child to develop age-wise where they're at, but also give them the academics that challenges them, that makes them use those executive functioning skills. So, personalized learning, that's what we do. Personalized learning refers to the instruction in which the pace of learning and instructional approach are optimized. That's what you guys do every day. Be proud of yourself. It's not easy to be a teacher for your child or for yourself. You know, I'm sure when you started having kids, you didn't say, okay, I'm going to be a teacher too. Did you go to school to be a teacher, right? Everybody's a teacher, right? But you're learning along with your son or daughter, right? And sometimes it's not easy. It's not easy to wear multiple hats. We have a really fun video for you that Danny spent a lot of time, and we thought we would add it in. Hope you're okay. We had to
train that fish.
I know you had to train that fish. I came home one day and I was like, what'd you do all day? Okay, so I want you to leave with some good information today. So there are 6 tips that we're going to chat about. The handout is in the back. If you didn't get it when you came in, don't worry, you can get it on the way out. Also, if you want to set up any time to talk to me, there is some fill-out cards. You can put your name and email on there and put it in the drawing, and just let me know, and I'll be more than happy to send you this slideshow, or contact me for any other information that you guys have or at all. So, 6 tips. Teach your child to talk their way through solving problems. It's a skill that is needed throughout life. So as your child gets older, self-talk skills will become more important. Encourage your child to think out loud as they solve logic puzzles and other problems. So for me, I think a lot of people watch me run down the road and they're probably like, that woman is probably crazy, because I'm talking to myself the whole time, right? I'm trying to figure out what's the next curriculum I'm going to build, or problems with my own children that you come across, right? So I usually talk to myself. Now, it's important to tell your kids, okay, well, let's talk this out, because your child's already up in here, right? Their head is so full that they have to get it out. So helping them talk through it, they're like, oh, okay, that might not be so bad. And over time, they learn those skills and are able to use them as adults.
I have a question on that one.
Yeah.
So our son does that a lot, and we always tell him, talk to yourself inside your head, because it gets confusing, and we're like, what do you need? And he's like, no, I'm just talking to myself. And we're like, well, stop it! This is where this starts!
Yes.
So how do we structure it where he can talk out loud and process things, but where we're not inundated and totally sidetracked by his constant blah, blah, blah?
That's a good,
Because it's also a huge trigger. My husband has tinnitus, and like outward noises is a massive trigger for him. So having this constant is like just maddening.
So, one word, come up with one word. When it's too much, like my word in the house is excessive. Excessive. And my kids know, okay, that we're tone it down, like I can't process, mom can't process this right now, it's just excessive. Also, having him cue into you, this is important. I'm having this issue and I need to solve it. It's different than I'm processing the game that I just did or what have you, right? These are those like life skill problems, like I don't know how to work through this math problem, or I don't know how to integrate myself into this environment with these other kids. Can I talk to you about that? That's different than what you're talking about, and I sympathize with you. I have that in my house.
Got it, thank you.
You're welcome. Help your child prioritize. This is that, I always, is it a need or a want? And so sometimes that's hard. Do I really need to go to the store right now, or do I just want to go, right? Prioritize what needs to get done. Like, you need to try to get through these 2 assignments before you go to the movies with your friends, or, right? Help them prioritize what needs to get done so you can have your alone time, right? We have to do that as adults. Oh man, I gotta go to work today. I gotta do this before I can go and have dinner with my partner or what have you, right? Break down steps. They can concentrate on one direction at a time. When you say, go brush your teeth, make your bed, and bring me down your dirty laundry, you know that they've already lost that. So instead of becoming frustrated, say, go brush your teeth. And then when they come back down, go make your bed. They come back down. Okay, now I want your dirty laundry. They can remember that one thing. Okay, same thing goes in when you're doing lessons with your kids. Break it down. I want you to read pages 12 to 13, right? Then give them the next step. Because if you lay all their schoolwork out in front of them, they won't know what to do. Or they'll start something and then start another thing and then another thing, and then nothing gets completed. With my kiddos that I homeschool, they have a checklist. You do 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can't move on to the next one until you've done the first thing. And we still have to break it down even smaller for some of those kids. Yeah.
So is there hope that we can move beyond that? Because
Yes.
in the employment world, that doesn't happen.
Yes, there is hope. With executive functioning support, like they have to have treatment and support in order to have that. But yes, there's total hope. But it is a lot of rewiring the brain in order for that to happen naturally. Because you like to think that as they get older that they grow out of some of those things. But without support and early awareness, those are lifelong learned behaviors. And it's very hard for them to change once they get into an adult world. And to go on to that, it also gives them a lot of feeling of failure when they can't hold a job. And what's wrong with me? How come I can't do this? Right? And so there's a whole other piece to that. And so, yes, there is hope. You just have to give them the skills now so they can do that. Okay. Step 4, let them have a break, snack or nap if necessary. So some of you have younger kids that you might be in here listening to this for. I encourage after a certain set of time for them to get up and have some type of break, snack. I have one kiddo that comes to me for homeschooling, and when he does his homeschooling days at home, one day he doesn't take a break. He starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and goes straight through to 2 o'clock. His mom can't get him to stop, which some parents are like, wow, that's fantastic, right? No, because I correct his work, and I can tell when his blood sugar has started to go down, right? Because the quality of work gets very limited. And so we've now put into his schedule, you take a break here, okay? After you've done work for a half an hour, please get up and drink some water, come back in a half an hour. It might extend his day a little bit, but it produces quality work. and he feels better about it too. No texting or social media. This is a big one for some kids. Having a phone next to you while you are doing schoolwork is not effective because kids with executive functioning are very easily distracted. And so the phone going bing, bing, bing can be very distracting. So set times that they can use it. I'm not saying don't use it at all if that's your, everybody has their feelings on this, but if your child does have an electronic device, set some specific times around it for their school day so they can focus longer. And then step 6, focus on your child's strengths. I'm going to go back to that hope thing for a minute. This does not define them. It does not define who they are. It is frustrating as a parent, no joke. It's very frustrating. But your child has so many strengths, and if you always focus on the things that they're not doing and that they're not good at, they're going to only identify with that. Your child has strengths. Yes, they might have executive functioning challenges, but there's so many more things about them than just this. So if I can't say anything is don't only focus on this. It might be crippling in some areas of their life and in your home. But there is hope and there is something beautiful in every one of us. So find that in your child. Don't focus on just the executive functioning. So yes, there is hope. Any questions? Yeah.
I had a question about, so if you have a child that has PFD and then they have good support and they get treatment,
Yeah.
and that helps to like reestablish those like neural pathways and crossing the midline and everything, is that something that is lifelong and will now be there, or do you have to continue that throughout their life to keep that connection?
That's a good point. You want to continue, you hope that by the time they finish the treatment that those are behaviors that are ingrained now. But like all things, you always need to keep them fresh. So that's where you're integrating those priorities of like how you organize your schoolwork and how time management, those types of things, where it should help keep the neural pathways connected. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions? Yeah.
Is there an age at which your child is just too old for this work?
So, let me test it out on my husband and I'll tell you. No, I'm just kidding. I like to think, so science is going to tell you different. I would like to think that anyone has the ability to change. And I like to think that the brain has the ability to regenerate itself all the time. It's how you do it. So I don't want to tell you that there's a specific age. Science will tell you yes, adulthood, but I'm going to tell you I think that they're wrong. Anyone else? Yeah.
I know there are like certain exercises, like physical movements
Yeah.
you can do with your child for like crossing the midline.
Yep.
Do you have any suggestions for books or YouTube videos or anything that resources for those kinds of movement activities?
So I don't use a specific YouTube video itself, but there's tons out there. Pinterest has a lot. I use mine mostly with math. Movement with math allows kids to learn math at a faster pace. I also do use it with kids that struggle with dyslexia. I use a program called Linda Mubel. I'm not sure if anyone else has heard of that, but it's Linda Mubel. It's multisensory, and so they're moving their bodies all the time because you're engaging at least 3 senses at one time. I am happy to, if you give me your email, send you some resources.
Okay, yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? All right. Thank you guys for coming. I hope this was helpful. And enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, okay. show you this. It's really amazing.
Oops, am I in the way?